and welcome to a brand new episode of Happy Mum, Happy Baby. But today we have a dad. He's a dad of three. He's also the 2019 winner of Celebrity MasterChef. Well done to you. He's an Olympic gold medalist, and he's currently retraining in a new field for the Great British Bobsleigh team at the 2022 Winter Olympics. It's Greg Rutherford.
Hey,
hello.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm good. We have met once, haven't we? At the Pride of Britain Awards on the red carpet, but we were meant to be going on a big old trek together.
We were indeed, yes. And then the story of my life, my body being an absolute disaster, meant that it didn't end up happening then. Because I had to have surgery that year in the end, which was a complete nightmare, which is, as I say, the story of my life. My body constantly falls apart. Actually, as I sit here now, and you mentioned it very briefly, the whole bobsleigh thing, I'm sitting here with like absolute agony in my back. Just because I'm old and I'm asking my body to do something that probably I should not be asking it to do. So I miss a trek and then can't really bend over at the moment or move. So all good fun.
But is that something as an athlete that there's just something inside you that feels like, you know, you need to do something else? Like you couldn't just stop. It's like, what's the next challenge? I'm gonna completely do something completely different. It involves ice, essentially. It's cold. You know, It's very different to what you've been doing. You've been training in like Arizona for what you were doing before, but now it's cold places.
Yeah, trying to explain that to Susie was an interesting one, to say the least. She wasn't thrilled by the prospect of me going back to sport. And you know, it's a really weird one because I think everybody looking in just assumes, oh God, you're obviously missing it so much, you had to find something. But I was actually really happily retired. Like I was really enjoying that I would eat cream cakes at midnight now because I could do that. And if I wanted a beer, I would have a beer. And it's weird things like the summer. For everybody else, when the summer, when weather gets nice, which obviously is a bit of a rarity at the moment, people would say go to beer gardens and restaurants and do all those sorts of things and have a great time. For me, for all of my adult life, all that I would do would be training and competing, so I didn't get to enjoy that. So for the last couple of years, I was thoroughly enjoying it. But then obviously the pandemic strikes and lockdown hits, and all of a sudden, all I could do was train a bit again because I needed to kill some of the time. I'm really lucky at the house. I've got a gym and a piece of track in the garden that I could train on. Due to boredom, I started training again. And then somebody from the bobsleigh world, a good friend of mine, Kaylee Humphries, who's sort of one of the most successful female bobsleighers of all time, she reached out and she'd been going on about it since about 2014. Like, come on, give it a go. And I said, no. And then she reached out again. I just sort of thought, well, why not? There wasn't an awful lot else going on, to be totally honest. So I'll try and go back to sport for a bit, shall I? And here we are. And it's been a bit of a bizarre journey so far, but it's been amazing as well. Actually, it's been quite enjoyable.
Yeah, it's that thing, isn't it? It's that new focus, especially in this weird time where life is just turned upside down.
Yes, and that was the big thing as well. I think for me, I've been really lucky since retiring. I've been incredibly busy and I've been doing other things. And I've been, I guess if you like, forging a career in other paths. But then to actually have a reason to train. Because do you know what? I think for years as an athlete, I would look in and people go, oh, I don't have time to train. Or I really struggle to fit it in. And I'd always be like, why? Like, you can always make time for training. But actually, I then retired. When it wasn't my job, it's really difficult. Like I completely take my hat off to people that work really long hours but still manage to go to the gym and things because it's incredibly difficult to do, and I realised that. So actually having a focus to train meant that, I guess if you like, I was staying a bit healthier because again, cream cakes at midnight isn't the best thing to be always doing.
And I imagine though, going from that much training and physical work to not mentally, that must have an effect as well. And if it is then more difficult to go to the gym and do all that stuff, like your mental health must take a battering in that as well.
Yeah, it's a really weird one in that aspect. So I think I was fortunate from the point of view of I knew where I was going when I retired, and I'd already put the wheels in motion, if you like, to have a plan. So for me, I wanted to move into broadcasting, and that was always a plan. I'd set out with Eurosport, who I now work for as well, that's what I would do. They offered me a fantastic job, and I'll be in Japan hosting a large part of the coverage, which I'm really excited about. So all of that was there. So I think I didn't have enough time to particularly think about that as such. And I thought, well, look, I'm going on to this. I remember the day after I retired, I was flying out to Geneva in order to get ready to start a trek for a show that we did on the BBC called The Pilgrimage. So it's literally the following day. I jumped my last jump on the Saturday. On the Sunday, I was flying. So I was straight into things. But again, I think due to the pandemic, I found myself in a situation where there was more time to think. And all of a sudden I am thinking, do you know what? I did love training. I did love having that purpose to physically push myself. And actually not having things like a show where I'm trekking across Italy and Switzerland or whatever else, or other shows that were lined up to be done, then you have that time to process and think about actually what you're missing. And I was missing move myself and testing myself. So as you sort of rightly say, there's now a focus again, which no matter what happens, there is a reason for me to train and push myself, which clearly I need to have in my life.
And has that always been the case? Like, was your childhood full of sport and physical activity?
Massively, yeah. Everything about me as a kid was really sport and active based. And do you know, it's a real shame, and I mean, you'll probably see exactly the same. If I go to the areas where I grew up, which isn't a million miles away from where I am now, the fields and the parks and whatever else that were filled with kids when I was growing up, you don't see them anymore. There's no children outside, there's no kids being active as much due to whatever reason that might be. And I think that's a massive shame. I think kids have switched off from being outside and going on adventures and climbing trees, creating bases in bushes and all that sort of stuff, and playing football constantly, as I seem to always be doing. So for me, it was always about being outside. I just wanted to be outside. I wanted to be playing sports. I wanted to be active. And I was lucky enough, I guess, even from a young age with my approach to sport, that was, I will find the sport that works for me, the one that I can win at. And for me, it was always about winning. It was always really, really important. So I would literally try every sport going to see if I could succeed at it. And for a while, it was football. Then bizarrely, it was badminton for a while. But always on the back burner was track and field. And it just so happened I went from being a sprinter that was a pretty good sprinter to then finding the long jump because I couldn't win at the sprinting, and then eventually forging a career from it. So it was always about being
That's
active.
something that I hear from so many Olympians. It sounds like I speak to so many. I've spoken to a handful, but it's that thing of find the sport that's yours and that's right for you.
Yeah, completely. Look, what I think everybody always has to remember, I mean, look, it does become your job, and there is times where it's incredibly stressful. It's very, very full on. And there's times, I mean, I had times during my career where I strongly considered retiring, leaving the sport and that sort of stuff. But you have to enjoy sport, and you have to enjoy the process of doing it, because it's hard work a lot of the time. It is difficult, and you say no to a lot of things that people would probably consider enjoyment things. So you have to enjoy it. So I think what you find, especially with people that go on to be successful in sport, winning is a hugely important part of that. And you get a lot of joy from winning. So if you can find the sport, if you are sporty, that works for you because you can win at it and you enjoy it, there's a much greater chance, in my belief system, that you can actually go on and have some form of career out of it, whatever level that might be.
And when you are so focused on that, on competing, at what point did your mind start drifting to family life? Was that something that even entered your head when looking forward? Was it always something that was always in the distance? Because I think a lot of us kind of go, oh, in 2 years, and it kind of drifts off. Was it something that you just always knew was something that you wanted?
Massively, yeah. So I picked kids' names when I was like 7. I was somebody that always wanted kids, and I remember, I'll never forget it. I had a friend at the time. His name was Reese, and I always wanted to call my first son. I was like, I'll have a son, and I'm going to call it Oscar. For whatever reason, at a really young age, I wanted to call it Oscar. And then they had a dog and called the dog Oscar.
No.
And I was like, oh, no, that's sort of that ruins it for me a little bit. And Oscar's a lovely name still, but the problem is when you have that direct link and somebody's sort of taking it from me like, but that was always there. I always wanted children, and I always wanted to have a family, and I was so excited. And it was really interesting when I met Susie, and it wasn't an awful long time after the Olympics, so my life was all a bit hectic and crazy. I think one of the things that we both connected on really quickly with was the fact that we both wanted children as well, which was hugely important to both of us.
Well, and it happened fairly quickly in your relationship as well. Like within the first year, Susie got pregnant. So what was that moment like of being told it's happening? Because it's one thing planning, it's another thing knowing it's happening.
I can't remember if you asked Susie this and what her response was, just because it was early on in the relationship, if you like. I mean, we'd been dating by that point, I think just under a year by the time she'd fallen pregnant. And yeah, certain things hadn't been said between me and Susie at that point, which she berates me for massive. I still get so much stick for it.
Greg?
No, because if I say it, people are going to go, "What are you? How did you not say it?" So something
You hadn't told her you loved her?
Yeah, I hadn't told Susie I'd loved her at that point. No, I know. I did.
What were you waiting for?
I know. And it's like, she absolutely tears me to bits still for it now. In a very jovial way, of course. But the worst part of that, and I don't know if Susie's ever sort of divulged this, she told me, and we're in the house that we're in now, it looked very different then because we've been renovating for about 700 years now. But when she told me, I was so obviously over the moon, but I didn't really know what to say. I was all excited. And obviously Susie at that point is thinking, well, that was a really good time to probably drop those words in there. But I still didn't say it, and it miffed her off a little bit, to say the least. But the thing was, it was weird for me because I knew, and I was super happy and everything else. It was just, I think, because it hadn't been said at that point, it really felt like, maybe this is the wrong time to say it, because am I only saying it because you've just told me you're pregnant? So there's the big bombshell. It was very soon after that point, but it took me a good 11 months to say that I love you to Susie, which I knew very early on that I was set and this was great and it was the best thing ever. But equally, it just hadn't been said. So
was it a thing where it just those words just never come out of your mouth? Were you thinking about, I should probably say it, or were you just completely oblivious to the fact that actually I feel this way, I should vocalise it?
No, do you know what? I knew it had also gone on too long. So it was like
when someone says that, like, calls you the wrong name and you can't tell them anymore that they're calling you the wrong name. Right.
Exactly. We'd built up to this point where I knew I had to say it and I should say it, but because that was now the thing in my head, I'm like, oh, when's the right time to say it? So I can often turn things, really build them up into something massive when they're probably not. I just needed to say it and get it out of the way. But at that point, it had been turned into such a big thing. Do you know what? It's a really good example, right? So, and I think most people have this example as well. So when I won in London, I was given this really nice bottle of champagne, like, again, very expensive, lovely bottle of champagne, right, in 2012, to celebrate the fact that I'd just become Olympic champion. What I did was go, I'll save that for a special occasion. I still have that bottle of champagne, right? And then what we did was, when we knew the baby was coming, I was like, right, we're gonna put it in the fridge and we'll open the bottle of champagne when Daphne comes, because it's our last baby, we're gonna go through all that sort of stuff, it'd be great. We didn't do it, we still haven't done it. And I think I've built it up into something now where that's open. I don't know, maybe what will happen, the world will end if I open that bottle of champagne at this point. But I think I turned it into something else, and clearly it was on Susie's mind as well, because she wasn't best thrilled with me not saying it. But I've said it many a time since.
You've made up for it. That's all we need to know.
I remind her every single day that she's loved and beautiful and everything else. So that there's no questioning it now, shall we say?
Well, Susie also doesn't have the easiest time in pregnancies. So not only does she have HG every time, but then she's also got a boyfriend that hasn't told her that he loves her. So she's going through the morning sickness, she's carrying his child, and, you know, there's no love, but there is, but it's just not vocalised.
Well, by the time that HG had hit, I guess, with Susie, she definitely knew by that point. And I'd like to believe that my actions also would show a level of love. Because they're difficult times, to be totally honest, and again, I can't make light of it because it is quite hard. But when you are clearing out somebody's spit bowl, to be slightly gross, it's the one fluid, for whatever reason, that I don't do well with. But you can't. Well, the thing is, sick doesn't bother me. I mean, you've got kids, dogs, all that sort of stuff. It doesn't bother me at all. But there's something about spit that I'm not too keen on. So a large bowl of it is very unpleasant. But obviously, I can't walk into a room when Susie's going through the absolute meal. Like I can't even express. Watching Susie go through it is one of the most hard and difficult things I've ever had to go through. But I can't walk in the room and go, oh yeah, I'll take some. That's disgusting. No, I can't do that. You just have to crack on. So I'd like to believe that she. Well, I mean, I had said it before she got hyperemesis. Yeah. So I definitely had said it. But that's a difficult time, to say the least. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it must be so horrible. Like, literally have only ever had a bit of nausea in pregnancies. So I don't know what that's like at all, but it must be such a strange time, because obviously you are happy because a baby is growing, but at the same time to see the person that you do love going through that and actually being quite helpless in that time as well. That
Yeah.
must be really hard.
That's the biggest point. You are completely and utterly helpless. And that's really genuinely difficult. I remember Susie she sat on with Nahal and did a 5 Live chat about it. So she was on there for about an hour or so. And a guy rang in while it was on. So she was sort of talking to people and things on it. And a guy rang in and he was so upset. He was crying on the phone because, again, this level of feeling completely and utterly helpless. And I was at home listening to it. Susie was in the studio. And I just remember just thinking, like, I know exactly how he feels. Like, because you're seeing somebody, they can't particularly eat, they're losing weight rapidly, they're having to go in and out of hospital, they're taking lots of different drugs, which there's always then people think, oh, this is a fear, could there be something that happens due to the drugs, etc., etc. And they're just not them, they're not themselves, and you become their full-time carer as well, that they can do nothing for themselves pretty much. And it's horrible, it's really, really difficult. Like, it truly is one of the worst things to see, to watch somebody lose drastic amounts of weight, not be able to... I couldn't go in the room. You've got to think, this is the crazy thing with it, because sense of smell and taste, everything is so heightened as well. Literally, I would go into the room to help do whatever I need to do, clear bowls out, whatever else. Within seconds, it would feel like she'd be like, you need to leave, because it was bringing on these horrible tendencies to obviously retch and puke and everything else. And you have zero relationship as well in that time. The way, if you can't talk to them, you can't even go and hug them. Like, it's horrible, like truly, truly horrible. And I think we were maybe relatively lucky, because with Milo, the first one, it wasn't too severe. So she was quite unwell with it, but it wasn't to the point how it was with Rex and Daphne. I mean, it was with Rex, because I guess she'd had a level of it, but it wasn't as extreme with Milo. So Rex came along, that was a shock, because say for 4 months or so, I had no relationship with Susie at all, bar to clear out her sick bowls and just get her whatever she needed at that point, or take her to hospital. And then with Daphne, we hoped with a girl that it wouldn't be as bad, but it was probably worse.
Wow. Well, it must also play into the idea, like, when you plan ahead, like, to have Daphne, that must be part of your decision. Do we go for another child, knowing that you're going to go through that? I know at one point you talked about wanting 4 children, so that it must play a part in, and you've just said this is your last, so it must play a part in your decision making, because you know that
Massively.
you're going to have to go through all that to have a baby. And I know that is a beautiful ending, but it's what you've got to go through to get there.
Yeah, hugely. Yeah, so everything is planned, and we look at what's going on around. So actually, having the pandemic, we said, well, look, we're in this situation for quite a while now. Why not try and go through the process of hyperemesis when we can't leave the house anyway? And then we'll hopefully, by the time we come out of it, we'll have a lovely new baby, and we sort of go from there.
Yeah. And you're there. At least you know that you are there to be with the other 2.
Yeah, and that's a big thing. And what also happens with the hyperemesis side of things, which is really fascinating, what often has to happen, it'll be, say, I don't know, 6 a.m. and there has to be food there, like there has to be something, and it'd be whatever it is at that time. So for a period, I remember with Rex, I had to basically get peanut butter on toast, and it had to be there by 6 a.m. or it was like the world was ending for poor Susie, because her body was just freaking out, basically, like going absolutely mad. So I had to have it there, and then obviously she would eat a bit, and then it would all eventually come up, like it would all come up, but you have to do all these things.
I mean, it's so bizarre, isn't it? Because I've literally heard of women, straight after birth, it's gone. Straight, so they can have it the whole way through, and then...
It's the craziest thing.
No longer feeling that.
Well, and isn't that amazing as well? I mean, it sort of shows the hormonal, maybe imbalance, I guess, as it would be for somebody who's suffering with hyperemesis, of how insane that is during the period. And then the baby leaves you, and then all of a sudden you start to feel significantly better. And she did. She felt so much better once Daphne was here. And of course, isn't having to take any of the sort of drugs that she was on before, is completely normal now, back to her normal self, which is lovely.
Yeah.
Do you know the weirdest thing was as well? There was one time where for one day, Susie managed to, I think she'd taken quite a lot of obviously what she was on, she'd been sick and everything, and she sort of appeared in the garden for a minute. And I got so used to by this point, I probably had about 2 or 3 months, I guess, of just being on my own, if you like, around the house.
Yeah.
And you have this weird moment where you sort of look like, hi, like, how can I help? Who are you? Like, how do I help? What do you need? It's not like a relationship as such at that point. It's, as I say, you're like this carer. So it becomes like there's a level of adaptation again when they're back in the fold. Because, as I say, Susie effectively lives in a bedroom, being incredibly unwell. I to and fro to get her whatever she needs, but you do everything else. So if it's taking the kids to school for those days that they were at school during the pandemic, if it's sorting out, cooking, cleaning, doing whatever else, you're just doing it on your own. Effectively, you're a single parent for that period.
Yeah.
So then when this person appears again, it really is, it's odd. You've had months of having zero interaction, no conversations, no nothing.
Well, I guess on top of that as well, you've got the guilt aspect of, like, Susie would be looking at the boys and kind of being like, I'm your mum, but I can't do what I want to do and what I need to do with you. And knowing that you're there, but like, how did you reassure her in that way? Like, you've just got to get through, and the boys are happy.
Yeah, that is hard as well, because again, for her emotional response to it, I obviously can't control, and again, I think for a mum who's so incredibly hands-on, I guess as you are, Susie, as a lot of mums are, to then have that completely removed from you is really difficult. So I would have to do my absolute best just to keep the kids placated in any way, shape or form at times. And there would be situations where maybe if one of them felt a bit unwell, I'd sort of carry them to the door and Susie would try and have a conversation. I mean, the other thing you can't help with kids, as you know as well, is there'll be certain situations, they'll wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and they were always with me. They would then sneak in to Susie's bedroom. And then I would because obviously my sort of senses are quite heightened anyway. And I'm they'd be like, a startle, oh God, one of them's gone. And they'd be run into the room. And then you would see Rex or something sneaking under the cover to try and do it, which is, and Susie's desperate for it as well. This is the horrible thing. And I'm like, come on, mate, you have to go now. And it's horrible and it's heartbreaking. And again, you can see that situation is so difficult for Susie. But for the kids, you just reassure as much, and you, again, keep them active. They're at their age where if they want to go see her and they may be a little bit sad because I've had to then pull them out the room because Susie's puking everywhere, then you go and do something. You just keep them active.
I mean, it doesn't sound fun at all, to be honest.
No, and that's again, so obviously in the early days when we talked about wanting 4 children, it'd be great. Susie, we both wanted kids, whatever else. Milo got out the way. It was well, it's not too bad. Rex comes along. And it's horrific. Daphne comes along, even worse. And I think that cements. But the situation we find ourselves currently in is that Daphne is an amazing baby. And there's these moments where you go, no, wouldn't it be nice to have another Daphne? You go, yeah, it would be nice. And you go, no, because the months leading up to that point are horrific. But you forget, don't you? That's the problem, you forget.
Yeah.
And then you find yourself it was a horror birth with Milo first time round, and then eventually you forget. And then here we are. So
Milo's birth wasn't good?
No, it was awful. No, really, really bad. So everything that could go wrong went wrong. And he got stuck and all that sort of stuff. And there was a lot of instruments being involved. And then he was forceps delivered in the end. I'll tell you what, that was a really interesting time. So I guess for the first time you're becoming a parent, and we're in this situation where, say, everything went wrong. So we'd gone through this process and Susie had sort of mentally built up. We were going to have a pool birth. We're going to have it all nice. It was all going to be quite serene and quite a pleasant experience. That was the plan. And we turned up to the hospital and all the pools were out of order, so we couldn't get in the pools first. So I was like, okay, fine. Okay, we'll deal with this. We're then put in this room and things weren't progressing well for Susie at all. She was in an awful lot of pain. And I never forget, the midwife just kept coming in and going, oh, just Gasner, you'll be fine. And she was like, no, so it's really quite it's getting horrific. Anyway, after hours and hours of going through the process, pushing whatever else, nothing was happening at all. Milo was back to back. So leading in, Susie had basically said, no matter what, I don't want a forceps delivery, because again, there can be obviously lots of problems that come from a forceps delivery. So she's like, no matter what happens, I don't want forceps. They have to figure out another way. So this is while she was lucid and just pregnant. Yeah. Basically, everything had gone so wrong, and she was in so much pain. She was dropping in and out of consciousness, and it was quite. So that's quite traumatic as well, because it's like she's not with us for the moment. Okay.
Well, and at that point as well, that's the person that you love. Going through that, and again, it's that helplessness thing.
Completely. What do you do? I mean,
Yeah.
the only thing I probably could have done was stick on some gloves and shove my hands up there myself to try and help. But I mean, like, that's not going to be helping anybody, is it? I mean,
Not
let's be
advised,
honest.
no.
Exactly. Yeah, don't do that. So you're sort of there completely useless yet again. And I had this sort of moment. I'm not particularly like I guess, I don't know, forceful person or anything like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I came in with this predetermined idea sort of dictated by Susie. So I'm basically following her rules, if you like.
Yeah.
And we've got this situation where Milo's completely stuck, and then she's sort of being told, okay, we have to cut and get forceps in to get him out. And I'm sort of there going, well, she's not really conscious, so I'm not entirely sure if I should be saying yes or no to this. So I had to have this moment where I basically kicked everybody out of the room. I said, I need you all to leave because I need to speak to Susie. And I had to basically wait with my face in her face for a moment where she sort of came to again. And I sort of explain. I'm getting quite upset at this point as well, like because it's quite a difficult thing to see it, and you're sort of there, and I'm like, Sue's like, she sort of comes through, looks at me for a second, and again, she's not 100% there, I guess, because what's going on. I was like, listen, they've said the only way to get him out is if they cut you and use forceps. And literally, just her response, she sort of looked at me like for this one lucid moment and just went, get him out of me. And I was like, right, fine. Like, and at sort of that point, I was saying, right, okay, got everybody back in the room. And I'm like, let's go for it, guys. Like, let's get him out. And again, you just feel utterly like there's nothing, you can't do anything, because you can't do anything at that point, really. You are
and also, I
useless.
think when you go into that situation, you have all these ideas of what it's going to be like, what you're going to say yes and no to. But actually, when you're giving birth, the big takeaways are that you stay safe and that the baby is safe. That's
Absolutely.
the only thing that matters. And
Absolutely.
actually getting the baby out, however that happens, you could want to do the hypnobirth thing and have the whole water birth or whatever. If you end up with a C-section, you've not failed. You've got, you've got what everyone hopes for, and that's a baby in your arms and being well yourself.
And that is the big thing, and it's. I think it is difficult as well, because I think some people obviously. So the one thing I guess I sort of say to people now, especially with their first child, is first and foremost, ignore everybody's advice, because everybody is going to tell you something different. So advice is great, and certain nuggets of it will actually be genuinely useful, but everything will be different for each individual person, and each baby is different. I mean, I remember we just had Milo, and we had this photographer over, we were doing a photo shoot for it, and he was telling us that, I've had 6 kids, and what you do is, as soon as they cry, leave them in the room for a few hours, and eventually they'll stop crying, they'll be all right. And we're like, we don't want to do that. Like, that's, no, thank you, we'll be fine. Because I think Milo was crying a little bit. He's like, nah, you just leave them, they'll sleep for the night eventually. And we're like, God, it sounds quite barbaric.
I had someone who literally told me at night time they locked the baby in their room. What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. Like, no. And again, at that point, you're like, oh, yeah, again, I've had 6 kids, and I'm talking about, no, I won't do that. And you're getting, okay, that's fine. But that's the big thing. But equally, I think one of the most important things, I think, for anybody to remember going in to give birth, and obviously I'm not the one that has to give birth, I'm just the one that watches, but is to, whatever your plan is, don't obsess about that plan, because the problem is you add so much more stress to yourself if something goes slightly wrong, because it's such a traumatic experience, really. No matter how you look at it. I mean, some people are very lucky, go in. I had a friend once who went in, and about 10 minutes later, the baby was there, everybody was fine, and they went home. Like, it was just easy. But often it's far more than that. And if you're so obsessed about a plan, that's then when I think when anything changes, it can make everything so incredibly stressful. And I say, we tried to make the best of the fact that we didn't have these pools, and we've been planning for that and everything else, and we sort of accepted that quickly. But as I say, for me, that moment where they said we're using forceps and you've got to bear in mind as well, the doctor, when they say we're going to use forceps and there is a 13% chance that by using forceps, they're saying it at the time, that we could cause brain damage. There is a X percentage chance that a baby can die. There is a chance that this can happen to the mother, whatever else. And obviously, I'm the one that's there, and I'm hearing this. I'm thinking, no wonder she doesn't want them.
Yeah.
They're bloody horrendous.
Well, and effectively, you're the one who's having to make that decision. Although you are Susie, you're the one who's going to have to push forward with that and then live with whatever happens afterwards.
Exactly, and that's the awful situation that you can often find yourself in as well. But again, I think, like you said as well, like, if you're quite fluid with how you go in and you just accept what's going on, that means that those situations, as stressful and as horrendous as they are, fundamentally, the doctors, midwives, everybody else, they just want the best for you. They just want you to come out the other end, like you say, with a healthy mum, healthy baby. So you have to take that advice on board. And I think being a little bit more relaxed, fluid, if you like, with your plan, I think that's probably the best bit of advice that goes in there. All the other stuff, as I say, how they sleep, whatever else, every baby, in my opinion, is different. If some horrific photographer wants to leave all 6 of his children to cry themselves to sleep for 12 hours, I see that as something else, but again, each their own, I guess. It's not for me to say, but yeah, that's not for me. But with those regards, be relaxed, whatever else, I think that's probably quite important.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because I think when it comes to the hospital, you're asked so much about your plan. Like it's something that you are actively told to think about.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
You can romanticize about what that's going to be like, and but actually, in reality, you've got to know that things don't always work in that way. You've got to be adaptable. And I think so. Even for me doing hypnobirthing, because I did hypnobirthing in all 3, and I absolutely loved it. I think part of it is trying to stay on top of your breathing, you're like being ready, then being able to be open to the different situations that might arise. So not being a purist and going, no, I'm not going to go down that route. Actually kind of going, I'm just putting myself in the calmest state so that anything that happens, I feel secure in that.
Yeah.
How did you feel then going into Rex's birth? Or was that a planned C-section?
Yeah, plan C. Yeah. So that was part of the thing, because everything went so wrong, and there's been ongoing issues since Milo's birth. Because that went wrong, the decision very quickly was, from Susie's point of view, of if we're going down this route again. Well, we are. I mean, she's pregnant. There's nothing else that is happening.
It's got to get out somehow.
It's got to come out somehow. So the only way that she felt comfortable to birth Rex was through a C-section. So we planned everything. So and it's amazing how much calmer and how nicer that experience is. And again, I know in certain situations that people say, no, don't try not to have C-section, whatever else. But from our experience of the 2 that we've had, it is for both Susie, baby, myself, whatever else, even though with Daphne, she got nicked slightly on her lip, so she bled a bit. So that was a bit of a concern at first. But the whole process of going into the theatre, the anaesthetists always seem to be the nicest humans on earth, and they're just so relaxed and calm and everything else. And these little things like the epidural, for example. So when Susie was giving birth to Milo, the epidural failed twice. So I'll never forget it. The anaesthetist came in. So part of the horror story was the anaesthetist came in and she looked exhausted, like, poor thing. I felt really bad for her. So she'd clearly been called back in. And I said to her, I was like, have you had a rest? Because she just looked, I mean, I'm not being horrible, but she looked knackered.
Yeah.
And she said, I've been on for 24 hours straight. And at that point as well, you're like, oh my God. And she couldn't, she couldn't. So Susie had a numb foot during the process of everything. So you got to think, she was cut, having the whole thing done, she wasn't numb for that. So pretty horrific situation to find yourself in. But with this, with the C-section, you go into, you sort of go down nice and relaxed, and you go sit on the bed and they get it in, they put it all and just everything. And I was sort of sitting next to her. I was, again, you're sort of, you feel useless, but equally it's more of, you're on a bit of a ride, if you guess. You're viewing something that's so relaxed, chilled and happy, if you like. It's just it's a completely different experience. And it was amazing.
Also, there's more control in that situation.
Completely.
Because everyone, I think when an emergency C-section or birth, there's so many variables that could happen. Well, actually with a C-section, I guess it is, you go in knowing what's going to happen.
Massively, yeah. I mean, the only funny story we have really from Rex's birth is that we went in, we thought we were all prepared, all chilled, everything was great. And then one of the midwives came in. She was like, "Okay, so do you have baby's hat ready as well? So when baby's born, we'll put the hat straight on and whatever else." And we were like, "Yeah, we got." Oh, hang on. Oh no, we don't have a hat. And we're in central London, and I was like, "Oh, we need a hat." And then all of a sudden, now you're worrying, like, they're going to think we're terrible humans. We haven't brought a hat for the baby. Oh God. So I pegged it out the hospital, ran into like the Paddington area where we were having the baby, and I was looking around, I was like, there's nowhere to buy, why is there no kids shops here? There's nothing here, there's nowhere to buy anything. I then jumped on the tube, and we haven't got long until so I'm like on the tube, I had to go a few stops to find it, because I was like searching on my phone, where can I get a hat? Got the baby hat, like came running back in the room, and we had about 15 minutes, but it was quite warm because it was July when Rexy was born. And I'm like sweating like heavily, but thankfully there was like a shower connected to the room. But I never forget that as well. I then was like, I'm gonna have a shower because like I'm sweating really bad. I'm not going into the room really heavily sweaty. So he's like, yeah, probably best to have
I'm not meeting my child like this.
I'm not covered in, just not be filthy.
Yeah.
Anyway, they went in, and then the midwife came in again and said, are you ready? And Susan's just like, Greg's just having a shower. And I could just imagine the look. I'm just like, of course he is, yeah. And then we'll be back in 5 minutes then. I'm like, okay, quickly, I'm getting out there. But yeah, apart from that, everything else was far more relaxed and chilled, which was great.
And was it the same with Daphne as well, because of everything planned? And also, if that experience was so good as well, why would you go back to
Absolutely,
the variables?
Yeah, we went down the same process, same hospital, same specialist, the whole lot, and it was just wonderful, just truly wonderful, like an experience again. And obviously the difference was this time is that COVID, we're in the situation where you're not allowed to leave the hospital, you're sort of stuck in there and everything else. So it's a bit different. So when we had Rex, there's a coffee shop quite close to the hospital, which is a really nice coffee shop. So I would sort of go in there in the mornings, have a coffee or go grab another whatever, come and go as I pleased. During Daphne's, obviously, you're in the hospital and you're in the hospital. We're there for 3 days. But it was lovely. It was amazing again. And we just relax, and it just feels so much better. And I guess maybe I get one difference. And this is where we felt so incredibly lucky with Rex. There was a sort of a process in place where they could take the baby for a while in the evening to let you get some extra sleep, which is an amazing thing. I mean, goodness me. But with the COVID situation, we couldn't have that with Daphne. But she's been such a dream of a baby, so much more chilled and relaxed, that it's been amazing from that point of view.
Also, I think when you have a first, though, you're so consumed with doing everything right.
Yes, absolutely.
Listening to the books, listening to all the conflicting advice everyone gives you. And the second, you're kind of relaxing. But the third, or when it's your last, you've got that experience behind you. And I think you don't worry about it quite so much.
Absolutely.
Especially if you've got, a baby that sleeps and feeds and stuff.
Yes.
And I think you get that space to just enjoy.
Absolutely, yeah. There most certainly is. I mean, I remember with Milo, I mean, he didn't sleep, he had silent reflux anyway, and it was just brutal. So every 45 minutes or so, we were up, changing him, feeding him, winding him, the whole process. And we just felt like we never slept. And then obviously Rex comes along and he slots in a bit because you've already got like a 2.5-year-old or whatever bouncing around as well. But now with Daphne, I mean, poor Daphne, I'll say at times, because the boys adore her as well. They absolutely love her.
Are you constantly having to say, back off,
yes,
leave her alone?
Yes, exactly that. So with Rexy in particular, because again, he's not quite 4 yet. He's still a little boy, really.
Yeah.
He go, oh, Daphne, I love you so much. And he's like sort of grabbing her and sort of semi-laying on her. So then during this process, which is amazing to watch of him like sort of being fully in love with his little sister, I'm also then having to hold him up a little bit. So I'm sort of like taking his weight while he's trying to, okay, off you get now, leave her, it's fine. It'd be like constant kissing. And you sort of see her like, get off. But they love her to bits, which is amazing to see.
Are they fascinated by the fact that she doesn't have a willy? Because
Yes,
when my
big
niece
time.
comes over, the boys are just like, what? Where is it?
What is that? And then again, obviously Milo gets it, which is good. He's sort of soon to be 7 later this year. But with Rexy, it was just, so Mummy, do you not have a willy? Like, no, don't have a willy. Daphne doesn't have a willy. No, she doesn't. It's because she's a little girl. I'm a little girl too. It's like, no, you're not, mate, because you're not. No. So, but it's amazing at that age. I think that's what's hilarious is just watching him figure the world out. With Milo, as I say, he's a bit older, he gets it. But yeah, so when changing her, especially the first few times as well, it's just like a look of what has happened to her, and it is a bit of that with them as well. Like, what have you done to Daphne for her to not have a willy? So, well, that's what's a bit different here, mate. Like, she definitely is different. But I say, watching Rex, the way he responds to it is so incredibly cute.
I think your love grows for the older ones when you see them interacting with each other. You see the love pouring out of them, and it just makes you completely thankful and grateful for them, actually, and the humans
Absolutely.
that you've, guided and helped grow, because yeah, there's just nothing like seeing the love between your kids.
Oh yeah, I mean, I put up a picture on Instagram not that long ago, probably, I don't know, 2 months ago or so, and it was, I sort of walked past the front room that I'm sitting in now, and Milo was just on the floor with Daphne, and it was just, he didn't know I was there watching or whatever else, and he was just sort of being with her and talking to her, and oh, it's okay, Daphne, all these sort of lovely things, stroking her head and that, and just to catch that moment, it's just one of the most beautiful things you can ever see, watching them interact with each other. And again, obviously you hear of kids that resent each other, and I mean, you never know, as she gets bigger and starts taking their toys or being a pain in the backside, there might be a few fights, which I'm sure will happen, but just this understand and love that instantly formed between all three of them was just wonderful to watch. And so with Milo being that bit older, I guess, he understands a bit more as well. And if she cries, there's none of this, oh, be quiet, whatever else. They'll try and comfort her, which I absolutely love to see. Watching them like that is truly amazing. And again, you're right, you sort of find a new level of love for them, just to see that they themselves are being lovely humans. That's really important, I think.
Is fatherhood what you thought it would be?
It's better. It's definitely better. It's weird for me as well. And I mean, I was keen for the boys in particular. Obviously, Daphne came after I retired. I wanted them to see a little bit of what I did as an athlete, because I always thought, I was hoping they'd find it really, really cool. But fundamentally, they do not care. They didn't care.
They can watch it on YouTube.
Well,
maybe in 10 years, they might be like, oh, well done, Dad.
Yeah, that's where we are quite lucky, I think, with that sort of stuff. I remember when on my final ever competition in the London Stadium, I brought Milo onto the track. And what made the news, not me retiring, but Milo running down the runway and jumping into the sandpit, that made the news, not me. And you sort of realise at that point, again, how important they are and how amazing it is to have those experiences to share with them. And one thing with this whole bobsleigh situation that I find myself in at the moment, part of what I'm hoping is, if I can make the team, which I'm confident I can, is that by February next year, my hope, I really do hope, is that things have changed a little bit in the world and they can travel. Because for Milo, I think in particular, I think it'd be one of the most amazing things in the world for him to come to an Olympic Games and view it as a spectator and hopefully watch. Because these are moments that I get to share with them, which, as I say, I'm very lucky that I have the opportunity to do that. But everything for me is about trying to impact their life in a positive way and make sure that they hopefully turn into fantastic humans and are respectful, are kind, and do all these sorts of things. I think one of the ways I can sort of maybe showcase certain parts of life is through what I did as an athlete and the working hard, that having to make the odd sacrifice here and there. The big misconception, I mean, you'll have a lot of people asking you when you're having your fourth, everybody asks me if the children are going to be athletes. Like, it's always one of the first questions. And I get it, and that's not a dig or a gripe at it at all, because it makes sense. But for me, there's zero pressure about becoming an athlete or a sports person, professional, whatever else. The only pressure that they'll find is that I will encourage them massively to do sport, because I think you learn an awful lot from it. And I think probably I guess we have similar backgrounds in a way from the sort of route that you took with, I guess, singing, acting, everything else like that, and being on stage and all those sorts of things. What you find through those walks of life is that you fail. And that, I think, is one of the most important things that you can teach a child, because when that's removed from them, then when they go into the wider world, they grow older. If everything's always just been given, or there's always just well done, you've been involved, the whole thing, that side of things, I think then when you actually go to try and be an adult in the world, it's a massive shock. It's a huge shock to the system when somebody turns around and says, no, you don't get that job, or no, that's not good enough, you need to do it again. I think in certain situations where I guess maybe we're lucky, we've actually experienced being told no, or you're not good enough, or failure in certain way. And I had, for every success I had in my career, and I was lucky to win 5 major championships in track and field, I couldn't even tell you how many times I failed, because it way outweighs it.
Yeah.
People want to remember the good times.
People don't see that. Yeah, exactly.
Completely.
They only want to celebrate the good times, and they almost forget everything else that came before or in between.
Absolutely. But I would 100% say, from my point of view in particular, that the failures were so much more important from the point of view of giving me drive and determination to go on and succeed eventually. I was lucky that I succeeded in the sport that I did. So that's something that I try and give to the kids. And I didn't realise when I wanted to become a dad that would be such an important thing of how much influence you want to have to shape them to be good people. Because that's the big fundamental from it, isn't it? The one thing I guess you take away, I don't care what they do as a job, as long as they're happy, they're good people, and they sort of give something to the world, which could be just being polite to people, which makes other people's days. I think there's an awful lot of pressure on people to always succeed, especially if you come from a family where a member of the family has done something that people know of and remember. Yeah. For my kids, I want to be a force to help shape them in a positive way, and whatever it is they want to do, to support that so they can be the best they possibly can at it. But equally, as I say, I want them to just be happy, kind humans. And then I think at that point I realised that my job as a dad has been successful, and I didn't realise that was going to be such a strong desire when having kids. I was just looking forward to kicking a football in the garden with them, to be honest. Now I get that, and I also. But
it's that thing, isn't it? It's all those other components that feed into what you do. In a sense, it actually doesn't matter what that focus is on, what that actual subject is. It's the focus, it's the dedication, it's the hard work that you put into something, it's the setbacks, it's all of that you're showing them. That's what you do in life. And you know what, my dad, he owned a cafe, but he worked really hard. And he showed us a work ethic in a very different way. You know, he got up at 4 o'clock every morning. He was knackered by the time he got home, you know, but that was the work ethic. My nonna lived up in the mountains, you know, she went up and she did her washing up in the fountain. And, you know, she was such a hard worker on the farm. Absolutely. And I think you see that it's a model and you can apply it to whatever you want to do in life. But I think seeing it is the most important thing that we can give our kids.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and that is the one thing. I grew up in a similar situation, very hard-working parents who were constantly had to try and do the best they possibly can. It's exactly the same here. Like, I want the children to see, and again, I guess at the moment I'm still physically able enough to sort of showcase that in a sporting sense as well, but it's not just that. Yeah. It's the other things that I now do, and making sure that when I am preparing to say, for example, head to an Olympics to talk about what I've got to talk about, I know what's coming, I know who to talk to, I know what to say, etc. Because those things are really, really important, and that does sometimes mean that you're typing away, finding out facts and information about people, watching video back of previous performances, etc. Because if you go into anything blind, it's going to come out not looking too good. And I mean, look, some people can blag beyond belief, but generally in a high-pressured, high stress situation of, say, a sporting event or hosting an event, whatever it is, if you're not prepared, it's going to all crumble around you. And hard work, as I say, comes with every walk of life. Doesn't matter what you do. Having that level of desire to push yourself and work hard and be driven. I think everybody has people always say, oh, it's easy for you because you're from sport, but it's not at all. It's a mindset. It's completely a mindset. If I wouldn't have done sport, if I would have been something else, I still would have taken that focus to try and become the best at that, whatever that would have been. Because to me, that's what motivates, and that's what I saw. And when you see it, as you say, it's so much easier to replicate it, and when you have a positive influence in that way.
Do you get lots of jokes on sports day? Is everyone like, oh, Greg's here, Greg wants to win?
You know, everybody thinks as well. I know I am competitive, of course. But
come on, how many sports day events have you won? Never mind the gold Olympic medals or anything like that.
Yeah, they don't matter. They don't matter at all. No, do you know what? Actually, Milo had his sports day, I think it was on Monday. And we couldn't go, so nobody knew about it. And that would have been his first proper one where I could have actually got involved. So I was a little bit gutted, although my back's sore, so probably for the best, actually. It saved me. Saved me like hobbling.
What were you doing? I was doing an egg and spoon race at the sports day. I got really competitive with the other parents.
The back spasmed. I'm out of the Olympics. I'm terribly sorry. Egg and spoon race has ruined me. But no, again, that sort of stuff, like, I would like to think as well, as much as I am very driven and I am competitive, of course I am, I know when to switch it on and off. So I know what I'm good at in life because I've spent a long time having to perfect it and whatever else. I know what I'm bad at life, which is most things, to be totally honest. I'm not great at most other things. Pretty good at physical things. I can generally blag my way around a studio or whatever it is if I've got to talk or those sorts of things, and I work hard at that. But most other aspects I'm not great at, and I accept that. I will do my best to be good at it. MasterChef was actually a good example of that, because from the two big shows, I guess, that I've done where I've put myself out there, Strictly and MasterChef. Strictly, I was terrible. I tried my very best. I just can't dance. And people go, no, you're all right. Listen, I trained 12 hours every single day to get to that terrible level. That gives you an idea of how bad it was. And it was 12 hours every day, and that's no exaggeration. But then with MasterChef, there was a situation, and again, it sort of shows, I guess, mindset. I went into that, and I could cook a bit, but not the best in the world. But this desire to develop the skill meant that when I'd get back from the studio, say that'd be 8, 9 o'clock at night, I was then cooking until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning to then get back up again at 5 to go back to leave the studio for 6. And that happened for 6 weeks continuous. So I managed to develop a skill in cooking because I was willing to put in the hard work. Yeah. Now, I think most people go on that show and probably just go, I'll have a bit of fun, whatever else. There are some people that genuinely are very good cooks and they do well. And then there's people, I guess, like myself who just, as a mindset, it's all about the mindset when you go into it.
How has your relationship with Susie changed since becoming parents? Because obviously you've been through so much within that as well because of, hyperemesis and the births and things like that. So now you're at this point, how has it changed from the dizzy heights of, when you were young and free and just traveling the world together?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely that. We were talking about it the other day, actually. We were sort of saying, do you remember the first sort of year of that I was in Australia, I came back, and then we both flew off to America. Then we spent some time in Canada hanging out together. Then we're here, there and everywhere, having a really great time. I think I was probably trying to impress her, but she didn't really realise at the time it's just how I train. It's I literally had to go to these places anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, first of all, I think anybody who's watched their partner go through giving birth, and I always forget that there was a soft tissue therapist called Pura who works for British Athletics. And I remember this must have been 2014, and I was competing I feel like it was Switzerland. We had this conversation, we're chatting, and his wife at that point had 3 kids. And he said to me, at that point, when you watch your wife, partner, whatever it is, go through birth, you have a newfound love and admiration for them, to watch what they go through and come out the other end effectively smiling. And it was so incredibly true. At the time, again, I hadn't gone through it, so I didn't really see it. But watching Susie go through it, you develop a level of, I guess there's a new level of love because you've seen something like that happen. But then on the flip side, what then carries on, which develops every single day, in particular, Susie, in my opinion, is an incredible mum. I think she's an amazing mother. And to watch the way she is every day, that develops.
And if you could write a letter on parenthood, on being a dad, who would it be to, and what would you say?
Oh gosh, it's such a difficult one. I think it would be an open letter because I think, as I say, my process of thought through having the children, it would be more for everybody to read, to sort of see, to maybe see my point of view from it. And I think the overriding view I'd want to give with something like a letter like that is to hopefully make people understand, okay, it is difficult, it is life-changing, everything else, but it is the most unbelievably rewarding, job's the wrong word because it's not a job, you could quit a job if you liked a job, lifestyle change if you like. And that's what it is. There is so many little things that you will find every single day from your children, from being a parent, that you never thought about. It could be a smile, it could just be something they say, or the first time they stand at the top of the stairs and swear because something's happened, because they're just repeating, and you're like, oh dear, that's not good. But all these tiny little micro parenting experiences, if you like, no matter what happens, no matter all the difficult moments and everything else, they are so unbelievably special that they will eventually outweigh anything else. And I appreciate that everybody comes from a different standpoint, socially, economically, everything else. But the one overriding thing is, if you take the time to enjoy your children as well, you will be forever rewarded with it, because you will always have the memories of those incredible moments. And you have to,
it is definitely
times
that
you have to
thing
wait
of,
for it, don't you?
Yeah, it's definitely that thing of, it's the focus is on the small bits, because we all know it can be chaotic and crazy, but actually those tiny moments, no matter how small they are huge.
Massive.
Because they completely change the direction or the mood of the day. And it might be for a moment that kind of makes you go, oh, this is it. This has made it all worthwhile, all the craziness. And it's those that keep you going and keep you motivated, I think, throughout everything.
Absolutely. As I say, that children have the wonderful ability to completely and utterly flip a mood. If you come in, if I've come in and, I don't know, I'm aching or sore or whatever. And I found it a lot during the early period of when Milo came around, and I was still really active. And I was actually went into the best period of my career after Milo came. The 2015 season, the year after he was born, was the greatest year of my athletic career in the way of actual performance. And what I found was I would come home from training. I might have had a bad training session. I'd be a bit peed off with it. Walk in the room and you've got this little boy smiling at you and just happy to see you. And it just... you realise it doesn't matter. Like it did not matter to me that I'd had a couple of rubbish jumps. It doesn't matter, because what matters is I walk into a room and this child was happy to see me. And I have it now. I come back if I've been training or been away or doing whatever I do, and I come through the door and I look I'm sitting from where they would be sitting now, and they see me and they shout daddy and they come running up and I get a hug. And those, no matter what's happened, that is the greatest feeling I'm going to have in that day and that week. And I live for it every single day.
Greg, we've come to the end, but before you go, I would like you to complete 3 sentences.
Okay.
And the first one is, being a dad means...
This is a bit I'm not looking forward to, because I'm terrible. As you can probably tell, everybody be able to tell.
It's happened since series 1, Greg.
I know, and this was the
4 years
bit.
In.
And I've been and I've literally been thinking about it, and like, oh God, like.
Also, I love the fact that you've clearly listened, prepared for this like you would if it was a sport. However, we're catching you off guard now, even though you knew it was coming.
I literally, last night as well, I was in bed trying to think, like, what am I going to say that's profound enough?
I mean, if it helps, Kate Middleton, aka the Duchess of Cambridge, also stumbled on this. She took quite a while. She procrastinated and didn't know how to answer it. It was like I really threw her off. So you're in good company.
Are you saying I'm as good, if not better, than Kate Middleton at this?
Well, you know.
Oh, dear. Okay. Well, the first thing that came into mind was responsible, because that was like a lean to my previous life of being free and doing whatever I wanted, and it all being about me. So, do you know what? It probably means no longer being selfish. And that's probably something that's very important to me, because, and we're there, because I'm sticking with that. Because
you're sticking.
That's that. Yep. Because everything I did previously was always about me. It was always for me. You are selfish as a sports person, no matter what. Like, you have to be. And if you're not, you're going to struggle. And there's being selfish, which is, it can manifest itself in a bad way, and you sort of ruin other relationship, whatever. But there's also just a way of doing it that means that you get the best out of yourself. But then you have children, and you realise that you, no matter what, you can't be as selfish as you were before, and you have to think of those people first. So for me, it means no longer being selfish.
Greg, that is more than acceptable. That's very good. Well done, you. Next one. Okay, come on. Think on your feet.
Let's go. Okay. Ready. Okay.
Free.
Okay.
Since having children,
Since becoming a parent, I've become far more patient, I would say.
Nice.
I'm not awfully an impatient person, but I think everything for my life was so I have to go get it. There's a competition here, you have to, and it's all about performing at the right times. There's always a time limit to that, whatever else. Then you have children and you realise that all of that just goes completely on its head. If you want to leave to be on time for something, but your child has decided that their nappy's now going to go to one side and it's going to destroy their clothes and you have to change it, you have to move with it, so you have to be more patient. So I would most certainly say that, I'm more patient.
And I'm happy when?
Do you know what? I'm happy when I'm out and about with the kids, with Susie. And you know what? Just taking in the surroundings and taking a moment for that I don't know, that self-assessment and everything else. There's nothing better for me than going out in the woods right at the back of our house, the kids jumping on things, playing in little camps, climbing a tree, seeing nature, spending time with the people that you truly do love more than anything else you do anything for, having those moments for me is absolute bliss. And if I was in a position where that's all I could do every single day, that's all I would do every single day, because I love nothing more than the excitement and amazement on the boys' face, in particular at the moment, and definitely soon, when they see something for the first time, a creature, an animal, an excitement of just climbing a hill. I truly am happy when we as a family are together and we're out and about, just absorbing a bit of nature and a bit of calm.
You know what, Greg? I said a sentence, but you've given me 3 great paragraphs for every single one.
This is the problem. Shutting me up is always the most difficult thing. Once I
know
start,
what you
it never
mean.
ends.
It's been lovely to listen to you.
Oh dear, I know, it's terrible. It is terrible.
No, it's been absolutely wonderful. You've been so lovely to talk to. I was listening to the episode with Susie actually earlier, and it's actually interesting. We didn't talk about the births at all, and I think hearing about hyperemesis from your point of view as the partner is also really helpful. And you've just been absolutely joyous. So thank you so much for
thank
coming
you for
on
having me.
the podcast.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lovely chat. It's always lovely to talk about Susie and the kids and even the bad experiences. I think they're important for people to hear. So yeah, thank you for having me.